let me get the YouTubers up as well. So we're going to do that, paste that in the chat. I'm going to post the same thing there so they know for reference. I was like, what is PCC? You don't typically see PCC listed here. There we go. Cool. Okay, cool. Well, welcome everybody. So today's video, I think it's pretty important. I don't think that my video is important. I think the discussion of this paper is actually really good. So, so cool. So let's kind of jump in. So the introduction here states, and I'll try to be, relatively entertaining while we do this. Maybe I could share my screen somehow. I really don't know how to do that without doxing myself on the internet, so I'm going to probably not do that. But basically it says post-COVID-19 condition, or also known as PCC or long COVID, is a major global public health and medical challenge affecting 5 to 10% of individuals who survive acute SARS-CoV-2 infection. Even previously healthy young individuals with mild or asymptomatic acute COVID-19 presentation may subsequently develop long-lasting systemic organic damage, which causes significant disability and severe deterioration of quality of life and social functioning. By the end of 2022, at least 65 million people worldwide, 65 million worldwide, had developed this syndrome. Numbers continue to rise as new SARS-CoV variants become increasingly transmissible. Okay? So do I have your attention? All right. The clinical management of PCC, or post-COVID condition, is limited by the lack of effective treatments. But as we know from this paper today, we'll probably figure out that vagus nerve related treatments may actually be a good idea. Here we go. This is where the vagus nerve comes in. So among the different possibly overlapping pathogenetic hypotheses, an early persistent alteration of the 10th cranial nerve, or aka vagus nerve, could explain a considerable number of post-COVID condition symptoms. The vagus nerve innervates the larynx, the pharynx, the lungs, the heart, the gastrointestinal tract, sites primarily affected by PCC. The vagus nerve also controls involuntary visceral functions as part of its role in the autonomic nervous system, including your heart rate, digestive rhythm, and modulates systemic inflammation through the nicotinic cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. Sympathetics, very interesting, right, guys? Stuff I've been telling you guys for years and years and years. Sympathetic and parasympathetic unbalances have been described in various pathologies, such as inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis, where they often precede chronic inflammation. Non-invasive vagus nerve stimulation has been shown to reduce inflammation in severe COVID-19 and is being further evaluated. To test our hypothesis of the existence of vagus nerve damage in PCC, we evaluated its structure and function using a comprehensive set of imaging and functional tests in subjects with PCC in comparison with individuals fully recovered from acute COVID-19 and subjects without previous SARS-CoV-2 infections. Okay? So I'd say so far I'm pretty interested. What do you guys think? Anybody in the chat? Share what you think. Does this sound interesting? Also got this cute little mug from the Starbucks Reserve in Tokyo. I didn't really get it. We got it at a yard sale down the street. But it's so cute. It's got little flowers and stuff on it. Love it. Okay. So here are a couple of the interesting tests they did, and I'll give you the results on COVID patients. One, they assessed the vagus nerve in the neck using ultrasound imaging. They put an ultrasound transducer right on the neck, and they did a scan of the vagus nerve to detect its diameter, the cross-sectional area, really, which is the diameter, perimeter, and cross-sectional area. They also did thoracic ultrasound of the respiratory muscles, which means your diaphragm, which is right here on your chest. Functional assessment. They screened for voice alterations, which were self-reported using the Spanish version of the Voice Handicap Index, VHI. Anyway, dysphagia, which is the swallowing, screening, eating assessment tool, EAT. Swallowing, motility, and gastric emptying were assessed by an esophago-gastroduodenal transit guided by scope. How much you can breathe, your heart rate variability, your sympathetic reflex response, which was performed by electrical stimulation to see how quickly your body would respond by your hand pulling back from electrical stimulation. So those are basically the tests, all pretty standard, foolproof kind of stuff. So there were 341 patients that they found to be as PCC, right? Post-COVID. So this is based on 341 patients that are assessed as the King cohort. Participants included in the study were mostly women in their 40s with frequent pre-COVID-19 history of allergies. So maybe they had some kind of something that was going on beforehand that made them more susceptible to getting it. So 23% of individuals with post-COVID condition or long COVID had a history of autoimmune disease, and 20% had required hospitalization during the acute COVID-19 episode. None required high-flow oxygen or mechanical ventilation during acute COVID-19, because that probably killed all the people that they put on. I think everybody put on mechanical ventilation probably died. I'm just being honest with you. Not everybody, obviously, but that did kill people for sure. That's a fact. Which shouldn't have happened, but whatever. Okay, so the results: morphological alterations. Let's see. So a certain amount were found with alterations in the neck. The vagus nerve in the neck, when scanned with ultrasound, showed focal thickening of the nerve. The left vagus nerve cross-section was 2.4 millimeters versus about 2 millimeters. So it was about 25% increase in surface area of the vagus nerve. Quite a few participants had flattened diaphragmatic curves in the thoracic ultrasound, which probably led to them not being able to breathe as much. So your air volume capacity, tidal volume is impaired. Dysphonia. 78% of the subjects had a moderate to severe score. Their voice was distorted. Your vagus nerve controls your voice, just so you know. So when you're listening to someone and you're like, wow, that person has a really strong voice, it means they probably have a strong vagus nerve as well. So, dysphagia, which is the inability to swallow. 30% of the patients had an abnormal score. Yeah. The esophagus transit test, 34% had reflux. Peristalsis reductions, 34%. Hiatal hernia, 25%. So the damage to the vagus nerve caused esophageal peristalsis reduction, meaning stuff gets, they have that bolus stuff getting stuck in your throat. They had esophageal reflux, so GERD, and a hiatal hernia, all related to the vagus nerve being damaged by COVID. It's not the only way you can damage the vagus nerve, though. And that doesn't mean that the only way that your vagus nerve can get really messed up is because of COVID. But it does show a connection between the inability to swallow, reflux, GERD, and hiatal hernia being vagus nerve related issues. That is what this is showing. And also that COVID absolutely can damage the vagus nerve. So breathing in and out, 62% of the subjects showed clinically significant reductions in the maximum inspiratory pressure, and 50% with altered had flattened diaphragms, meaning their diaphragm had literally lost muscle tone. Also a vagus nerve thing. Heart rate variability was changed as well. This one was not that significant, oddly enough. So, very weird. And then sympathetic response, the latencies were significantly shorter in subjects with PCC compared to the two control groups. Subjects with PCC had a faster sympathetic reflex response than controls. So that shows that people were more probably in a sympathetic dominant state because of the COVID, meaning they were stressed out. And they were kind of probably stuck into a very chronic state of stress post-COVID, which showed in the test. So anyway, that's interesting. Do you guys find that's interesting? Yes? Good. Lori, yes. TK, thank you. Yes. Yeah, Lori, you wrote, I know 4 friends it did kill being put on a ventilator. Yeah. Very fucked up. The whole ventilator thing was a total scandal. I can't believe they did that. I mean, I'm not surprised by much after all this shit that happened. But so, okay. Anyway, discussion. Reading from the paper. This study provides evidence of structural and functional alterations in various organs and body territories innervated by the vagus nerve in subjects with post-COVID conditions, also known as long COVID, including the respiratory and digestive apparatus and the autonomous innervation of the heart. Our findings point to a central pathogenic role of vagus nerve dysfunction in the pathophysiology of the PCC. This possibly occurs in addition to other SARS-CoV-related pathophysiological insults not evaluated in this work and should be further characterized in larger prospective cohorts. Our findings open a possible first avenue of interventions to ameliorate some of the most disabling symptoms of the PCC, such as dysphagia, loss of your voice, dyspnea, which is reflux, and then dysautonomia, which is general, issues with your, generally issues with your stuff, your whole autonomic nervous system, which you don't want to have jacked up. Dyspnea, labored breathing, sorry. So let's see, anything else? I thought this was interesting. I've had clients who have had Guillain-Barré syndrome, and the ultrasound studies in the past that they referenced, that they cited in this paper, said that ultrasound studies in subjects with Guillain-Barré syndrome show structural changes in different peripheral nerves, including the vagus nerve and cervical spinal roots, compared to healthy controls. Such changes consist of an increase in the cross-sectional area of the nerve, which may be patchy, and alterations in the ultrastructural echogenicity, similar to what we observe in our study. In the Guillain-Barré, I say bar, I know people say Guillain-Barré, but I'm just going to say Guillain-Barré syndrome, neural changes can be observed early from the onset of the disease and reflect immunomediated histological alterations that lead to a regular thickening of the peroneural fascicles due to interfascicular, perennial, and epineural edema, which means in this case, in this study, they found that the people with PCC had an increased thickening of their vagus nerve, kind of pointing to an edema, means a fluid filling up of the vagus nerve in the PCC subjects. There have been also other studies by Papadopoulou, and they showed that some of their subjects actually had an atrophy, a suggested atrophying of the vagus nerve. Both reported the same pathologies and the same symptoms: difficulty swallowing, changes of their voice, difficulty breathing, reflux, gastrointestinal disorder. All of those were similar and shared in post-COVID condition, long COVID patients. But one study found that the vagus nerve was still inflamed or had an edemic swelling. And another subject from a year prior, because this is just published like today, a subject study from a year prior showed the vagus nerve was affected, but it had no longer had the swelling. It had actually shrunk and kind of atrophied a lot, noticeably, under an ultrasound scan. Pretty scary. Not good either way. Not good either way. So let's see. Anything else? Lastly, I'll just read the conclusion. In summary, the study provides evidence of organic alterations along the vagus nerve territory in subjects with post-COVID condition, including the respiratory and digestive apparatus and the autonomous innervation of the heart. Our findings point to a central pathogenic role of vagus nerve alterations in the pathophysiology of the PCC, are highly informative to systematize clinical evaluations of this syndrome, inform PCC cohort studies, and support evaluating therapeutic interventions to ameliorate PCC-associated dysautonomia. Great. Awesome. Hope that's interesting. Oh, it says I'm frozen. Can still hear you, though. I hope I'm back, but I am hardwired to my internet. I pay $100 per month for my internet, and I don't know why the hell I can't stream to Facebook. It just doesn't make any sense, but maybe. Who knows? Anyway, I hope I'm back, but there's not much to see except my hat. And this is a Columbia hoodie that my girl bought me. She's like, this would look cute on you. I'm like, okay, cool. I agree. I think she's got good taste. But she's got good taste because I have good taste, and I taught her how to pick out clothing for me. So there you go. Anyway, good. Okay, so let's discuss to complete off where this paper ended in the conclusion. Let's talk about treatments. How would you treat a condition, a PCC condition that affects the vagus nerve? I would say you need to stimulate the vagus nerve for sure. And that's what they proposed at the very beginning of the paper. And also for people who are like, well, who are you? What are you qualified to talk about, right? I do work with people with ultrasound vagus nerve stimulation all the time. Anyway, I see people want to leave. That's fine. Fine. Don't stick around. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I run this massive Facebook group. I'm just some random dude apparently. But yeah, so in the certain conditions that I'm familiar with, using ultrasound vagus nerve stimulation to the left cervical vagus nerve of the neck of a human subject with low intensity pulsed ultrasound, you do typically see the recovery of a number of the conditions that they had, including reflux, swallowing, dyspnea, which is the shortness of breath issue, as well as the reduction in GERD, reflux, some of the mental cognitive disability that can be induced post-COVID as well seems to let up a lot. Also, biggest one that I often see is the amelioration of insomnia that happens post-COVID. So people can develop some very severe sleeping disorders. There's lots of things that affect the vagus nerve, you guys. I mean, honestly, if you can find an effective treatment that's safe and it's not going to make you worse, then you should absolutely be throwing something like that at it. Nobody knew at first what treating the vagus nerve would do. But the good news with vagus nerve stimulation is it doesn't have the potential to kill you. If I were saying like, yeah, you guys should mix like amitriptyline, Benadryl, oxycodone, and fentanyl to treat post-COVID disorder. I would expect you to be like, that's a pretty incredible claim. That's going to require some extraordinary evidence because the risk that it would kill you. That's a treatment that could kill you, like on the first dose. So you should have extreme levels of scrutiny on that. But if we're talking about transcutaneously stimulating the vagus nerve, where there's like very little risk, if anything, to you as a person, and you're like, I don't know, I'm gonna stick to what my doctor's prescribing me, which are all central nervous system things. We have people here in the chat right now who have been severely disabled by benzodiazepines. And you guys didn't flinch when your doctor recommended those, did you? And guess what we find is really good for tapering off of benzodiazepines is vagus nerve stimulation. It's actually the one thing that I've consistently seen be very helpful in getting people off of benzodiazepines, which I believe are prescribed post-COVID as well. So, geez, I mean, and that's the one thing they're not going to tell you, that you're not going to get off those benzos ever, if not, without some really severe help or risks of messing up your entire body. And also, they used vagus nerve stimulation in the hospitals when people were on respirators and people had 75% blood oxygen levels. Like, people were about to die, and they did transcutaneous vagus nerve stimulation right on their neck in the hospital, and it raised their blood oxygen levels significantly. It allowed them to breathe and for them to reduce inflammation in their body. That was pretty amazing. So yeah, if I'm qualified to speak to this, I absolutely am. I'm the one who has to take on clients who have these issues and try to find solutions for them. And typically speaking, you're going to see cervical instability as a result of post-COVID condition. So your neck is going to get all messed up. Then your vagus nerve is going to get messed up. And then your digestion is going to get mixed up. But the treatments for some of those things are really going to come down to supplementing with a couple key ingredients. So choline is important, certain amino acids, etc. Oh yeah, Amy, she's a great example. Literally, PCC affected her ability to speak. She's a client. She's been working, I think, for 2 months now. Clear-cut difference in her ability to speak again. Guess what she's been doing? Stimulating her vagus nerve transcutaneously. She follows my protocol. The exact same thing that TK does, the same thing that Lori does. It's not that complicated, you guys, but I don't know. Whatever, what would I know? I've just been out here talking about how COVID is going to affect the vagus nerve because of the symptoms that you develop since literally as soon as that started. I was in China in 2019. I caught COVID probably around the 1st of December in 2019. I actually tangibly caught COVID-19 in the year you guys got COVID 20. I got the OG Kush COVID. I was sick as hell. And so I knew what was coming, and I came back to the United States. I had to fly back from China to the US in January after recovering. And I was just like, oh my God, these people have no idea what's coming down the pike. And you just can't warn people. I was handing out masks to people. I'm like, here, these are gonna go out of stock. Get these, take these. Posting about it in my Facebook group. I think we had something like, fuck, man, how many people did we have? 8,000 members or something like that? That's a lot. Is that a lot? I don't even know. Time is just a really strange circle. But anyway, so super stoked about that, Amy. But yeah, anyway, so treatments, COVID, you're going to want to stimulate your vagus nerve for sure. And also there was another article that I wanted to post here. It's called the Vagus Nerve Infection Hypothesis. and it's from Mepedia. So put that here. Vagus nerve infection hypothesis. So this is something that I think people do really need to probably read. I think it's pretty critical. So anyway, very interesting stuff. It's been known for a very long time that your vagus nerve is very susceptible to infection. And if you develop these kinds of disorders, then you're going to have pathologies associated with the dysfunction of your vagus nerve. Now, if you go see a doctor because you have reflux, they're going to be a reflux-specific type of doctor. And they're not going to be able to understand that the reflux that you're having in your throat is connected to the dysmotility in your gut. They're going to have you go see a GI doctor. So that you're going to see an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and then a GI doctor, and then a speech pathologist for all kinds of 3 different things, even though there is one nerve that connects all 3 of those pathologies. Reflux, loss of your voice, and gastric motility, for instance, are all related to the vagus nerve. All related to the vagus nerve. And if you treated the vagus nerve specifically, that those 3 things would start to recover properly. But again, wouldn't that be taking away jobs from 3 different doctors if there was one person or one thing that could laterally treat right down the middle? Yeah, absolutely. So it's like, why do people want to resist artificial intelligence? Because it will put people out of work. It's like, yeah, so that you have to go bankrupt medically to get better, so that a doctor who's probably, okay, look, doctors probably do make quite a bit of money, if I'm being honest, wouldn't want any of them get out of work so that you guys as patients could have maybe a better experience with this whole thing. You know how much of a pain in the ass it is to have to go to 3 different doctors and explain your condition to 3 different specialists? And then, is this doctor in network? Is this doctor out of network? How am I going to pay for this? Oh my God, I got a scope, but the anesthesiologist wasn't in network, so I'm being charged $8,000 for this. That's what the whole shebang is. And you think it's me? You think I'm like the only one who's like, oh my God, I see the Matrix now all of a sudden. It's like, no, they know the vagus nerve is not some like, oh wow, we didn't know about that. No, the vagus nerve has been written about in medical literature for hundreds upon hundreds of years. Roman doctors were writing about, ancient Roman doctors under the Emperor Caesar, Aurelius Caesar, his doctors, the one named Galen, 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 was dissecting pigs and finding their vagus nerve. The vagus nerve isn't some mystery. It's the most massive, most obvious nerve in your entire body. If you ever dissected a human being, you'd be like, damn, what the hell is that? That thing's pretty big. It's not a mistake. But, again, the technology wasn't available. Well, did you know that they used to use electric eels to put on people's necks to stimulate the vagus nerve? They've been stimulating the vagus nerve for a very long time. So if you want to try to tell me that, like, oh, doctors just don't know about this whole vagus nerve thing, it's like, bullshit, they don't. They totally do. When you go in to have your voice, when you go in to get yourself checked as a kid, don't they put a tongue depressor in your mouth? Put down and say, go, ah. That rising and falling in the uvula is controlled by your vagus nerve. They know that. They know how to think through this thing. They just apparently somehow, even though it's part of the required medical degree, I guess are not piecing this together, that your vocal is controlled by the same nerve as what helps you digest food. It's just insane. It's totally insane. And it's they know that it regulates your immune system too. So if you have a vocal issue, you're probably going to have a rheumatoid issue as well. You're going to have inflammation as well. But what does that mean? If you improperly treat that, what does that mean for them? It just means that they're going to make a shit ton more money on you. Do you know how much it costs? Do you know how much on average it costs a single person to have to go in for an immune treatment every single month? It's like $11,000 to $13,000 per month. Just if someone has an inflammatory condition that went missed by the medical industry. Somebody's making a shit ton of money off of you not knowing about your own vagus nerve. Totally. And yet, now that we're knowing this, they're still going to find some way to still bilk you out. They're going to put you on a subscription model for having to purchase a new vagus nerve stimulator. They're going to implant one in your neck, and it's not going to turn on unless your insurance covers it every month. You're going to have a 5G vagus nerve antenna implanted in your neck. They're going to find some way to even nudge people like me out who are like, hey, there are ways you can stimulate your vagus nerve where you don't have to go in for, crazy surgeries. The biggest people who don't like what I'm doing or what we're doing here are the companies that implant the vagus nerve stimulator, because they go and they say, ooh, juicy, that's a $16,000 to $20,000 surgery, and the person has to get it every 10 years. So that's, again, that's a pretty hefty subscription model that you are locked into. Just like when they talk about children getting, look, in the US, I think most of you are here in the US, to get a child put on hormone replacement therapy at the age of 10 or 14 is to create a lifelong patient. I just saw a number that said the annual rate of growth for gender reassignment surgery is growing at a 20% year over year rate and will be worth $3.2 billion. You think they really give a shit about these kids and they're like, oh, it's their true self. No, these surgeons give a shit about how much money they're going to make off of converting your children into fucking freaks by chopping off their body parts. This is the same kind of bullshit. Oh no, it's innocent, pride, all this kind of shit. No, they don't give a fuck about this. They would happily chop off your children's legs if they could make some big amount of money off of it. Okay? And so them keeping you ignorant about the vagus nerve is what leads you into a pretty severe inflammatory condition where you are a lifelong patient. God, fuck, man. It's insane. So anyway, I encourage you to keep your vagus nerve healthy and happy now. You notice that the vast majority of the people that are in this paper that are having PCC conditions are women. Women from the ages of 40 and up. Women from the ages of 40 and up are way, way, way more likely to develop these conditions. So start sounding the alarm, folks. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a flying fuck. I'm probably going to get totally demonetized from YouTube forever. But they do not give a flying fuck about you or your body or anything like that. They want the money, and the money. And they want to make you into a lifelong patient that's just sitting on some bed with IV stuck in your fucking body, pumping you full of fluids. That's the ideal for you. That's what they want for you, okay? So be really careful. Ignorance is no excuse at this point in time. So do everything you can to protect your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is the number one thing that is critical for you to live a long and healthy life. Fact. Your life will be debilitated if you do not focus on your vagus nerve. If you're not feeling good, it's very likely that your vagus nerve is not happy or healthy. It's very easy to mess up your vagus nerve too. So, I know. Anyway, calm, big sighs. Anyway, thanks. Yes, Sarah, Emmy is being mentioned. Screw the doctors in the system, pain in the ass. I know it's a debate kind of thing we could have, but my God, I'm not the only one who noticed. Look what Lori said above. 4 of her friends were murdered by putting them on ventilators. There were whistleblowers in the New York health system that said that the ventilators are killing people, but they continued to do it because they didn't want the doctors in the hospital to get sick from COVID, even though they were surrounded by it all the time. That was willful ignorance that they did that, and that killed people. And then you want to tell me, it's fine. They're innocent. They just don't know how doctors just don't know anything about this vagus nerve shit. That'd be like saying McDonald's doesn't know that the sprinkling natural flavoring that they put in your vagus nerve, that they put on your food and your burger, isn't intentionally stimulating your vagus nerve. The stuff they add to your produced food stimulates your vagus nerve, and they know how to do it. There are studies on the vagus nerve and thyroid conditions dating back to 1932. You want to sit here and tell me, yeah, doctors in the medical facility they don't understand the vagus nerve. Bullshit. They know a lot about the vagus nerve, actually. They test it all the time. When they test your blood pressure, they're looking at what is your vagus nerve working or not. When they look at your heart rate, is your vagus nerve working or not? Do you have elevated heart rate? Do you have decreased heart rate? They're all looking at your fucking vagus nerve. They're just not telling you because, again, the less you know, the more they have control over you and what you have to spend your money on. So, Jeebus. Man, I'm so sorry to hear that, Lori. That sucks. Yep. Yep, it's pretty expensive to get sick. Definitely expensive. Emmy, what did you write here? So, Sarah, you wrote, Emmy used to be called post-viral fatigue syndrome, post-COVID condition, long COVID. It's very similar. And guess what? Emmy was reclassified as a neurological condition in 2018. It's cerebral. Yeah, it could be glial cells. It could be, there's lots of things. Definitely a lot of problems that can develop from that. Absolutely. Well, anyway, before I get completely canceled and banned from YouTube, I'm going to end the stream on YouTube. Thanks, YouTube, for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. Awesome. And then, anyway.